Well,
All right.
good evening, ladies, gentlemen, children, everybody around the world with our massive amount of viewers from all
All
over.
Millions.
right.
We
Literally
are,
millions.
guys, we
Billions.
have 9 likes on our podcast on iTunes.
Yes.
5-star reviews. We're killing
Celebrity
it right now.
status. It's awesome.
So, welcome to another episode of the reintroduction. This is actually our 4th episode. I'm here with my amazing hosts, Mina Suiris,
Hey, hey.
and my fantastic shrink, Mina Murham.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Shrinking away.
We are excited to launch this 4th episode with you guys and want to encourage you. If you haven't checked out our last episodes, episodes 1, 2, and 3, they are on Facebook. No, they're not on Facebook. They're on YouTube. They're on Apple iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from. And you can definitely check those out. I actually tried it today with Alexa. I said, Alexa, play the reintroduction podcast, and it worked, guys. So we made it.
That's legit right there.
Wow.
We made it. So thanks again, guys, for getting on and chatting away and getting into this conversation. Today's conversation is going to be particularly interesting because I think it's very relevant to the current time period with everything going on with coronavirus. And the subject that we're going to be discussing is, why do bad people succeed? Why does God bless the good and the evil? And I think it's particularly important because a lot of people are struggling financially, emotionally, physically, whether they're sick. And is that God's blessing on their life? Or when bad things are happening, is it God's sort of rejection towards them? And why do we see that some people that are taking advantage of others in the stock market are making billions throughout this whole tragedy? So how do you guys reconcile this as being believers and people who are in healthcare? How do you reconcile this idea of good and evil?
Bro, talk to me.
I think the first thing is it's hard to reconcile. Before even we're reconciling it, when you do look around, it seems like things are lopsided. And it seems like people who do all the right stuff, like by the books, sometimes the books don't play well. So that's the part. I think maybe that's a starting point. Is there is something there that causes question, and there is something there that's, especially now, one thing that I've been reading about more in the healthcare world is healthcare disparities, right? Like how even in this whole COVID thing is that, if you're a vulnerable minority group and things are life is beating you down in every which way, things are getting even worse for you now. And if you're a billion gazillionaire, you just think, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So it's been a conflict for me. I've been struggling with it and saying it doesn't seem fair. I don't know if I have a good answer, but I know I have good questions. It doesn't seem fair.
Yeah, I think over the course of the week, I became an uncle, guys, which has been very, very exciting.
Mabarook, Uncle
But I've
Mina.
been an uncle to many before, but this time it's actual, flesh and blood. So it's amazing to see a new life and to be part of that, to be part of the planning of raising a child in a family. And part of the discussions I would like to have with my brother and future baby Suiris is, what are we going to do when it comes to making sure his future is straight? Because usually the first thing that comes to mind is when an old tante at church is going to come visit and say, oh, hopefully he'll become one big nice doctor, he's going to become very successful and he's going to have everything that he wants. That's usually how we define success. I want him to have everything that he wants.
Those aunties
So
at church.
we teach our kids, we teach our kids from the very beginning is that if you play by the rules, then you'll succeed. But I think what we fail to do is we fail to define what success really is. We just say, if you play by the rules, you'll succeed. And then we end up maybe setting wrong expectations, or do we just misunderstand the whole thing? I don't know.
So I guess that takes us to our first sort of thing that we need to flesh out. What is the definition of something that is good? I know I'm using this a lot, with quotations. So why don't we define what it means for something to be good? So we obviously all have our own human interpretation of what goodness is, right? But our idea of goodness is kind of flawed because it's subjective. It's based on what we perceive to be beneficial for ourselves. So when it doesn't rain for me, I have a great day in the park, but it's not so great for the farmer who is feeling the struggle of needing his crops to grow. So, how do we sort of reconcile this idea of goodness versus, and what is there really a definition for it?
First thing I'll say is I think part of the problem, again, of like the definition is even when the example that you gave, I think the usual reaction would be like, bro, who cares about the farmer? You know what I mean? Like farmer meme, bro. Forget farming, right? It's about me. What's good is what I like. Like for me, good is if the Knicks win the championship. Everything
Amen.
else is bad for everybody. I don't care. I don't care about the
Preach, brother.
Lakers. I don't care about every other team,
Preach.
right? So that's the honest reality. Like to the baseline is how do we define good? Like when St. Paul says like those who are unwise measure themselves by themselves. The reality is when we're honest with ourselves, the way the metric, the ruler that we have for goodness is my own comfort, my own reality, my own because I am the center of my own universe, right? So if things are not falling at the center of my own universe, then it's not good. It can't be good. How could it be good? Whether it's pain, whether it's losing my job, whether it's anything outside of my plan for my world. And for me in the psychiatry world, those shattered expectations and those like that setup of like my world and what I want my world to be and things falling outside of it causes so much heartache and distress. So again, I don't have a great answer, but I'm at least it's important to begin with an honest beginning of like the honest beginning is good is me centric to many of us.
Yeah. Bad is also me centric
Facts.
in the sense that whenever we ask that question, why do bad people succeed? Because who is your definition? Who fits under your definition of bad?
Them.
Is it like Hitler? Right? Yeah. Is it like the ones who have committed atrocities against humanity? Or is it like my ex-partner, ex-wife, or like someone I'm like not fond of anymore? Or is it like a friend of mine who just like did something shady with his business and then ended up making a lot of money? Like who is bad? And then
Michael
looking at
Jackson,
it is
that would be
right, yeah, and a lot of people's definition that's that. So it inevitably ends up becoming a discussion of why does everyone else but me succeed? Like whether it's Hitler, whether it's just my bad friend, or whether it's someone who did me wrong or someone that I don't care much about, is like the reference point does not become goodness. The reference point always becomes me. And when we answer that question, usually we answer in one of three ways. We say, well, how do you know that they are really bad? Or how maybe like they get up in the middle of the night and like feed the poor. Or how do you know that they're actually successful? Maybe like what you see, the charade of success is something that they're doing to like cover up their inner brokenness. Or we say, you know what, just focus on a reward. Keep doing you and focus on a reward. And in all these three approaches, we're not really answering the question, because the focal point of it is still them. Like it's not me. So how do we bring the discussion of goodness to myself instead of talking about other people?
Yeah, I mean these are fantastic points. I mean, I think the great C.S. Lewis once said, "You, a man does not call a line crooked unless he has some sort of idea of what a straight line is." Right? So we don't really know. We have to have some sort of basis to sort of gauge what goodness is. And I think for Christians, the ultimate goodness that we see is God Himself. Like He is the baseline of goodness. So anything, from our perspective that falls short of that is often defined as, bad or unrighteous or not good. And I think to both your points, right? Goodness is subjective. It's self-serving, and oftentimes it's short-sighted, right? It's only what I see right in front of me. I heard that recently from a sermon. So, these are things that we have to sort of keep into account for those who are listening. If there's a period in time in your life that you're struggling with this idea of feeling like you're not being blessed, or your God isn't being good to me, ask yourself what does it mean for something to be good, and where are you getting that perspective from, or that definition for what goodness is. So what do you guys think about that in terms of the idea of, if the goodness comes from God, right? If goodness is of God, then what is God's blessing, right? Like, what do you guys think of that sort of question that people often ask?
Lambos primarily. I think that's the number one source of God's blessing.
Totally.
But the better the car, I think the more blessing. That's been my MO. No, but I think
Speaking
you're
from the
quite.
guy who used to drive a yellow Porsche.
But why you gotta play me like that? You gotta put me on blast in front of our audience. I'm
I
very
love.
humble.
It was a humble yellow Porsche that is
I'm
fantastic.
just you
I,
gotta live that blessing, that blessed
Meaning
it's
you
life,
are
okay,
hashtag
being
blessed.
Maron.
blessed by God, blessed by Him.
I sold it, خلاص.
I'm just playing, man. I'm just
No,
playing.
but you're right though. But you're right because maybe somebody will see something, whatever material thing, and say, "Oh, that's blessing," right? And I'm reminded of like this one account of Jesus himself, like when some dude came up to him, he was like, "Ah, Jesus," and then he said, "Good teacher." And then I always thought it was cool that like Jesus didn't object to the teacher part. He's like, "All right, you call me teacher and you call me rabbi, and so I am. Like I've taught you some cool stuff." And he pointed him to this idea that like, hey, just keep in mind, good. You're talking about God. If you think I'm God, you can call me good teacher because I'm the good God. Then we can have a conversation. But if you think they're going to have some superficial nonsense about what you should do, what you shouldn't, or what you should have or what you shouldn't, whether you should have the yellow car or the blue car, then we gotta take a rain check. But I felt like God was always to the heart of things, like repurposing and refocusing of saying first, again, like we said in the first part, if life is me centric, it's going to be hard for you to have any real answer if it's not a God centric answer, right? And then if, like Mina's pointing us to now, like if you have a God centered answer, then you could answer like God's perspective. Is like the greatest thing that God can give me. If the most beautiful gift from God is stuff, then that's really sad. I would expect more from the God of the universe. I remember a quote from the church fathers of even when we like pray and ask God, hey God, give us like the greatest of stuff, we can be in danger of saying like we're asking a king for dung or poopy prayers, I think was my thought about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna be
the,
seeing a lot of poopy in the upcoming months.
the
That's
poopy
for
emoji.
sure.
Yeah,
So
with your expectations. I'm seeing some poopy now with my new nephew.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm expecting twins, by the way, guys, for the
Woohoo!
listeners.
Dude, you've got
So
a whole lot of poopy coming your way.
a ton. Not to get us on a tangent, but Amina
But it's
mentioned that
important.
my first thing was
Yeah.
those diapers that were going to be existing in my household. Do you know they even have a trash receptacle specifically for diapers?
You better get it.
And
A
it's like
magic
seventy
genie or something,
dollars.
right?
Yeah, the diaper genie or something
Diaper
like that.
genie.
Wow.
It's no joke. It's no joke.
It's a must.
But yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, anytime the things that we're praying for, if they are out of line or not out of line, but out of sight from who God is and what He's desiring for us, oftentimes it can look like we're asking for dung because a king has so much more to provide for us
Right.
than the dumb things that we ask for, like a Lamborghini, which for many would think that that's like, the ultimate gift from God. But to be honest, after a few years, that Lamborghini is going to be dated and might have issues. So, very expensive to take care of.
Maintenance.
Um,
We also tend to think of blessings as a shortcut. Like that's our idea of blessing, especially sometimes in the church. We say, okay, you know what? You're sick, like take the relics of this like saint, he's going to give you a blessing and you're going to be healed. Or like you're
Mm.
struggling with work, like pray to this specific saint and then you're going to find like, and the idea is supposed to be about fellowship and living that life of fellowship with the saints and the community of the church, but it becomes more about shortcuts. What can I do to like beat the system in a sense, like to get
yeah.
to get out of it without any issues? And that's really has never been the point of talking about blessings. The idea in its simple form is that the system is played, the system is hacked, and God is in control, and God has been wanting to fix the system. It's like, think of like Amazon being hacked and all of a sudden like a lot of information is being leaked. So how does the company deal with it? You don't take the entire website offline in order to fix it because there's so many people who are still
Mm.
benefiting from it. But the idea is our system has been hacked. Life, the way it was intended, has been hacked. And God, in his approach, has invited us. Like, whenever you have a system that is hacked, you've got three kinds of people. You've got a hacker, you've got someone who's patching it, and you have your bystander, someone who's just watching it and like waiting for something to happen. And we've all been all three.
Yeah. So I guess the question is for you guys is why does it feel like God is like blessing those who are totally grimy people? Like just like people that if we just take some like objective measures, right? Things that we have like a baseline for humanity. Like this person is not that great of a human being, right? Again, we're judging, but if we were to just take very objective measures, it appears that God sometimes is blessing those people who are grimy, right? So, how do you guys reconcile that? And then how do you guys reconcile the verse where in Matthew 5:45 where he says, "For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust." Right? So, if the sun shines on the good and the evil, and the rain rains on the good and the evil, and obviously Christ, and that's right after he says, "Bless those who curse you, turn the other cheek."
Right,
Like
right.
that's the so what do we think of that? And how do we have a conversation about that? Because it seems sort of unfair.
It does seem unfair, and to me, to be honest, it goes to sort of like the heart of what we're talking about in this whole podcast and stuff. Is like it sort of comes down to like who do we think God is? Because I think if God is Santa Claus, then Santa Claus operates by very clear rules, right? As judgmental of a dude as he is, right? Like you're on his naughty list or you're on the good list, right? He doesn't cut you slack. Okay, you're naughty, you're naughty. Okay, there's no bike for you, little Timmy. Like that's how he rolls, right? That's how he is. That's Santa Claus. And I think honestly, like if you think about, if you're listening, your conception of who God is, if God is Santa Claus, then he is in breach of contract. Like you're being good and you're not being naughty and you're not getting the Christmas presents. God stinks, right? Fire him, replace him with the Easter Bunny. Like if that's the case, he's off. But because God is not Santa Claus, because God is, in our belief, like he's Christ himself, who the Godhead in the flesh, coming to give us himself, then wait a minute. Then maybe it's not about like how did Jesus, bless or not bless the wicked, but it's maybe that we're all sort of on the naughty list, right?
Mm,
So I know we're gonna talk about that more, but that's my conception is like God ain't Santa Claus.
mm,
Yeah, we begin by talking, and that we began the conversation by talking about who really is in the category of bad, and we forget that everyone really is a creation of God. So maybe like you've got a naughty kid, but it's still your kid, and you have to think of him as your child until the last breath. That's just how the world works and how God works. And then, just like being in a failing system, there are those who are taking advantage of it, and there are those who are trying to make it better and trying to patch it up. And there's a role for both. And we have played on all sides. We've played on the side of the wicked, and we've played on the side of the righteous, plenty times. I um i remember in fifth grade, I think it was algebra class. I remember, and I will never forget this. And it was during one of the exams, and allegedly, just because we are on record here, yeah, allegedly, quote, I was I was taking the exam, and there were a bunch of questions I didn't know the answer to. And it was like a big exam, but it wasn't the final exam. I think it was maybe the first really big exam. And while taking the exam, there was a kid sitting behind me who was like a brilliant kid, really smart kid. I looked at him and I was like, dude, like I don't know the answers. Allegedly, I don't know the answers to these questions, and what do I do? And he thinking that like I'm about to fail this exam, he just like allegedly, expose this paper. Like, if you if you need an answer, you can copy it.
A great
And
fifth grade scandal hero.
right. So you know what? I ended up like, taking a piece out of the pie, seeing whatever questions I didn't know the answer to, and helping myself to it. And then the exam was over. Everything was fine and dandy. Lo and behold, the next day, he ends up passing, doing all right. And I end up breaking the record for the test. I got the highest grade in the entire class. And the teacher was so impressed, like, you're like the most brilliant kid in my class. And I took the credit when this kid pretty much did all the work. That's a silly example, but I think of it as like, he is someone who could have easily said that. This is someone who just, I rigged the system to my advantage. I benefited from it. But later on, I came to pay the price because the teacher expected me to perform at such a high level every time that I could never live up to.
Mm.
And he got ripped of his credit and of his hard work.
mm.
So
Okay.
When we think of ourselves as good, I think each of us can look into his past and dig up, at least one story of being on the bad side of things.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I can name probably a dozen stories exactly like that. So very similar stories. There used to be a place called The Spot in New York City. And 28th and Broadway used to get
As your legal counsel, I advise you from the story.
knock off everything. You can purchase whatever you want, knock off everything. But anyway, let's
China.
we can spare the listeners the details, but there's a lot of things that we would normally consider not to be that big of a deal. But when you look at if you have a standard for what goodness is, right? Then sometimes we think the things that are gray, are oftentimes okay, and that puts me on, the good list, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I think the reality is all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. None of us are righteous.
Sounds like the
There's,
Bible.
you know,
What's
just a
that?
little bit like the Bible. And I think when I personally when I have that perspective of myself, the reality of who I am, that I am a sinner and I fall short, and there are moments where I have glimpses of righteousness,
Mm.
but the reality is the majority of my life I fall short, and that's actually why we need a savior, right? Like that's because none of us can redeem ourselves. None of us can bring healing to ourselves, and that's why we need the true physician to enter into our lives and to bring healing to it. And the more that we cling to him, the more that he heals us. So this idea of you know a good and a bad person again is very subjective and very based on our own you know limited sight, because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes of a person's life as well.
Right.
Like, you have no idea. The person that from the outside may be appearing to be the worst human being, you don't know what they're doing, you don't know where their heart is. um, so I think that's where we have to sort of check ourselves at times and evaluate whether or not we have a speck in our own eye
Right.
before starting to
Yeah.
look around at other
But,
people.
and that's it. And that's my point, Chris, is that we shouldn't even concern ourselves with what they're doing. Like, we
Yeah.
shouldn't even be concerned if they're bad or good in their own way. We should just be focused on what is our role in fixing the current situation.
Yeah.
Are you going to be a bystander and just like look at the chaos and say it's not my problem? Or are you going to, in a sense, and this might sound blasphemous, are you going to give God a hand in
Mm.
in going through the rubble and like fixing things out? I think there is one of the Jewish rabbis in like the Zohar, which is a commentary on some of the books of the Old Testament. Their version of the fall of the story, when you talk about Adam eating the fruit, they don't say it's an apple. They say the fruit. They say that Adam, he smashed the shell of the fruit inside the fruit and he ate from it, in a sense that he mixed the good with the bad and
Mm.
just ate from it, and that way like missed out on the actual taste. Like, you've got someone who's in a failed system, you've got someone who's doing bad, and he's just gonna like you don't take an egg, smash it, and then eat the egg and the eggshells with it.
That's your
Someone
Rocky
who's gonna
Balboa.
just someone who's gonna smash it, eat whatever they want, and run away. But you have to feed other people, and by doing that, you have to first go in and pick out the small eggshells, clean all that up so that everyone else can benefit, including you. And it's an invitation when we see that in our own lives. You have to dig into your own life and say, okay, where has God blessed me? Because we also
Mm.
have a very short memory when it comes to remembering the good things in our lives, but we have a long list of bad things that happen to us.
Mm.
So we'll say, okay, where has God blessed me? What do I have? Like, forget, like, if I were to be living in this life by myself, there's no one else to look around to. What do I have that God has given me that can make me better, that can make me realize my potential, and that can make me serve everyone else around me who's needy? And it's privilege to be able to say that from the comforts of our own home. We're not on the streets and asking that question. It will be a completely different ballgame, if we're talking from that sense. Tell me. It's hard.
No, I was gonna say I agree with. I mean, I agree with what I understood. Yeah, you're as always like deeper than I
I'm
can fully
unclear,
comprehend.
not deep. I'm
No, I
unclear.
think that's
Very
a
deep, very
very
spiritual.
But one of the things that you said that I think strikes a nerve too to the experience is like when you do look a little bit into yourself and ask yourself that question. I feel like oftentimes you'll oscillate between one or two extreme positions, right? Either you feel like, yeah, you know what, hashtag blessed. I really am blessed and God has given me good things. And then start doing what you're doing in the beginning of this podcast, saying like, well, then everyone else stinks. God has really blessed me because I'm very good and I'm very spiritual and bless me, Lord Matanya, right? Or you're going to go the other extreme and say like, no, you know, like if I would be more blessed if I wasn't so whatever. And I do think about something that I've done and the other thing that I've done and the other thing that I've done and say like, because of all these things, like it's the truth behind what Chris is saying, but I distort it into say like, no, I do need a savior, but like I'm really, really bad. Like when it comes to good and bad, I'm really, really bad, or I'm really, really good. Right? Like things just can. It's to me sometimes it feels like it just the pendulum swings
Mm.
rapidly one way or another.
And we think we are deserving in the periods of righteousness more than we're in the periods of like sort of unrighteousness. Like when
Yeah.
I'm being good, I think God should bless me. So you know, if I have been tithing, right?
Right.
And I've been doing such amazing stuff in church, my bank account should be loaded with cash,
Facts.
right? And he should just be giving me more so I can continue to give to the church, you know, the 10% or whatever amount that I give, and then keep the rest for myself, and load up a big load of cash in the bank account. But the reality is like, I think the question that I've been struggling with is like, I think we put God in the in like on defense. Like he almost has to be sitting on the in the judgment seat, and we're sitting and asking him, God, why did you do this, and why do you do this, and how do you do this, and what person should deserves this, as if we are in the position to be God and to question him. And I think it goes back to that passage in Job where he says, are you the everlasting? Have you been here before the ages? Did you fashion the earth? Like, who are you to question me? Which I think it's okay for us to ask questions, but I think when we put ourselves in the judgment seat and pointing around at other people, we miss the opportunity to be connecting to God. You know, when your eyes are everywhere else but above and within, you're really missing the point, right?
Mm.
And I think that's where we have to reframe the question is thank you, God, for blessing the good and evil, because you show no partiality.
Yeah.
You're not like me. You don't bless those who deserve to be blessed and curse those who deserve to be cursed. You love everybody because that's the person of who you are, and that's your character, right? And it goes back to that old quote by St. Anthony. God is good. He's without passions. He's unchangeable. And one who understands that is sound and true to affirm that God does not change. So if we know that God does not change, and that's his character, and he is love, then we got to reframe the question for
Right.
ourselves.
I love that. I love that the fact that God is, and as much as it can be sometimes, if we're honest, like annoying, God's unchanging love, because it's cool when it's towards me, but it's not cool when we feel like it's going to someone who doesn't like deserve it. Right? Like I was for some reason thinking yesterday about, even though it's like out of season, right? But about the story of Jonah. Maybe it's because I saw your nephew. Right? But it's like you have the story of someone who is so pissed off at God for being too good to someone who doesn't deserve it, right? And sometimes, even though the title of our conversation today is like, why does God bless the haters? Sometimes we got to check ourselves because we become those haters. We
Mm.
become the hater of saying, God, maybe the problem is not with their success. The problem is with me and God directly, and saying, God, why are you so good to everybody? You should just be good to me. Like a parent and a child, and the kid is so self-centered that he doesn't want the parent to love the other sibling. Like you should love me more than you love my sister, more than you love my brother.
Mm.
And if we check ourselves in that idea and saying, wow, isn't it great that God is unchanging, that when I feel like I'm at my worst, like I have murdered people in my heart and I feel like I'm the worst person ever, God's love is everlasting and eternal to me. And then when I feel like I am Mother Teresa for some reason, because maybe I gave somebody a sandwich or something, then God is still merciful to me there too.
Mm. So then that means that success, the idea of success is not relative and it is absolute. The idea of success is truth, is that God himself, my walk with God, is success. If I were to tell If I were to tell you, your 10-year-old Merhom and 10-year-old Chris, and I brought you your wives and said, this is going to be your eternal happiness and fulfillment. Anything that you've imagined you wanted would be fulfilled in this. You'd be like, ew, no, I want my Xbox, you know? And that because you can't, as you have to agree. I mean, you have to agree now that they do fulfill you because this is on record. Yeah, they're not. But the idea is that now that you see it, and now you see how much they challenge you, and now that I see how much they challenge you, and how you guys have grown because of it, you can one day say, you know what? It's truth. Is that fulfillment can come from these challenges and the way that God has paved for me. But I couldn't see it when I was 10 years old. There's no way because I'm only focused on what's right in front of me. And the idea of success is the same thing. What I'm only seeing in front of me is that material thing, or what my neighbor has, or what I'm missing, or what I think is going to make my life complete. But as I walk and I grow in the knowledge of God and attain more fulfillment in my life, I realize that it has always been intended to be this way, and that I'm supposed to just walk it and bring some more people along the way.
Mm. And sometimes the road is broken, right? Sometimes the road doesn't appear to be so paved to what we deem to be good, right? So the reality is maybe again we have to flip the question for ourselves is if I feel blessed, right? Which by baseline, we need to change the baseline for what we consider blessing is, right? Let everything that has breath praise the name of the Lord, right? So if we're breathing, we should be praising God. If we have like just this idea of living, we should be blessing God and thanking him for our existence, right?
Mm.
But the reality is, if we do have that baseline of breathing, then we should be blessing others, right? And if we should be blessing others, and God has put us on this earth to be his hands and feet and to bring heaven to earth, then we should be thinking instead of God, how can you bless me? We should be thinking, how can we bless those around us who we see are suffering? And again, instead of looking around and seeing people who we deem unworthy of blessing, we should be looking to within ourselves that we live in the United States and we are in the top 1% of the 1%. So we're in the 0.0001%. And by just living in this country, and how can we, with that great blessing and that great responsibility, bless others? Too much is given, much is expected, right? So
Mm.
I would challenge our listeners to really dig a little bit deep into that question is like, how are we need to change our idea of what a blessing is.
Mm.
And that's exactly what God told Jeremiah when Jeremiah asked that question, and he said, God, how come the wicked prosper? And God pretty much told him, like the verse says, if you get Jeremiah, if you get tired racing against people, how can you race against horses? Basically, it was the idea that there's more battles to come and they were going to be much tougher than the ones that have passed.
Mm.
And it's almost like God is saying, don't just sit here and dwell on like what others are doing. Get up. There's more work for me and you to do together. And that's like our invitation, is that there's more work for us to get up and do instead of just sitting down and crying and complaining. There's so much blessings that we have, and there's so much brokenness around us that we need to be part of fixing. And that's the real blessing, and that's the real success.
Yeah.
And I feel like I think for us, like our individual lives, like there have been moments or periods where we felt that and we've experienced that individual like success, right? Where like everything else was stripped away. Like I remember like a time in my life where I felt like there were no distracting materials. I felt like I've lost material things. And I felt like I received, like when St. Paul talks about thanks be to God for his indescribable gift, like the real gift of God. I feel like maybe that's the invitation that I would give our listeners to is like, there's a gift of God that surpasses cars. There's a gift of God that surpasses stuff. And it's real because we're just three regular dudes. And when we've experienced that indescribable gift of God, the one like central idea of our mind is like, man, I gotta get that indescribable gift of God to other people. Whether that's involves also material, right? Like Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, to the gospel to a hungry man is bread, right? Sometimes to someone who's struggling, that's the gospel. Or sometimes it's like presence, sometimes it's something else, but no matter what, that gift of the person of Christ that we truly receive and truly live out, and then we truly see that it surpasses riches, then that's like real #blessed.
So how do we flip the blessing, right? How do we flip the blessing? So thank you guys again for a fantastic conversation. We'd encourage all of our listeners, really dig deep on this conversation. Really think and look within, because when we look within, we're really able to sort of sort through some of our misconceptions about who God is and the blame that we often put on him in regard to our circumstances, right? Our circumstances may be a blessing in disguise that we just don't see in the moment. So, don't let your idea of blessing be subjective, self-serving, and short-sighted. Let's reshape that conversation of what a blessing is and think to ourselves of how much more we can be blessing others. So thank you guys again. I encourage all of you to check us out on Apple iTunes. Subscribe. We need our more than 11 people subscribed. I don't know if that's the actual number.
Give us a like, number 12.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to our Facebook, our Instagram. We're on every social media platform there is.
And send us questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, concerns, Chris, what's our email address?
reintroductionpodcast@gmail.com, or if you go on the website, reintroductionpodcast.com, there is a contact us tab that you can write a long question or, criticism, whatever you want to say about us. We're open to feedback.
Encouragement before criticism.
That's much encouragement. We're very fragile. We're very fragile, egoed men. So just prop us up because we're so.
But we're gonna bless the haters, right?
That's right.
All day. Bless them haters.
Right.
So thank you guys, and we appreciate you tuning in. And we will see you on our next episode of the Reintroduction Podcast. Thank you, Mina Suiris. Thank you, Mina Murham. You are rock stars.
Back at you.